Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're running through every character class coming to the Path of Exile 2 full release, including gameplay, some of the skills we know about, and a sprinkle of my own speculation. I'll throw chapter markers in the description so you can jump around to the classes you're interested in. We know there will be 12 classes in total, but let's be clear, it's speculated currently that only 6 to 8 of those will be available on early access release, but that's still to be confirmed. Some classes have been given their own trailers, and others are still shrouded in some mystery. If you want to keep up to date on all things Path of Exile 2 without the clickbait, sub to the channel. We're just over 1 month away from the early access launch. Before we jump in, if you're new to Path of Exile, then you should probably know a few quick things about classes in this ARPG. Grinding Games takes an unusual approach in the genre, allowing any class to use any weapon and any skill in the game, assuming you have the right attributes. You aren't locked to certain attributes based on your class either. It doesn't matter if you're a ranger, you can use an axe or summon minions. You aren't just stuck with a bow. This is the beauty of Path of Exile. You can really make any build you want possible. But you might be asking, what the point of a class system is if everyone can use everything? What's the choice you're actually making when you choose a class? First up, for the new players, it gives them an idea of what the class is geared towards. If you see a ranger, you might think, yep, I want to be Legolas, and this is arguably going to be the best class to pick for that fantasy. Your class determines where you start on the passive skill tree, which means starting as a ranger will put you closer to those passive nodes associated with bows. As an example, you can easily move to the other side of the tree if you want those minions, but you'd be spending more points to get there. Your class also locks you into selecting one of 3 ascendancy options, which are unique to your class selection and are there to meet the class's power fantasy, and let you specialize further into a playstyle you'd expect. The Witch, for example, is almost certainly going to have a necromancy style minion focused ascendancy, but the specific details on those haven't yet been announced. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into those classes that have dedicated walkthroughs released by Grinding Gear Games. I'll link all videos used in the description so you can check them out if you want more information. Starting off with the Ranger. Whether you want to be Robin Hood or Legolas, the Ranger is clearly geared towards those players that enjoy bows and bow skills. This class will excel in ranged combat, with skills like Lightning Rod, allowing you to place down, rods that conduct lightning between each other, zapping enemies as you rain down arrows. Or maybe you're more of a wood elf and want to focus on plant and poison based skills. Vine Arrow is one I'm personally quite excited to try, allowing you to shoot out plants that latch on enemies, slowing them down and poisoning them to take down packs as they struggle to approach. I appreciate that in designing this character, Grinding Gear Games have given them a lot of escape tools that give you the chance to jump away from enemies or vault over them to keep your distance while landing killer shots. The Ranger also has the option of riding a rower. For those not familiar with Path of Exile, it's a large chicken, or something very akin to a chocobo from Final Fantasy. It's not super clear if this is a Ranger specific option, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is tied to one of the class's ascendancies, and may not be available to all classes, but sub to the channel and as soon as we get info on that, you'll see it here. Sticking with a range theme, our next class is the Mercenary. This one was a real surprise, and one of the classes that encouraged them to explore the WASD movement system that's available in Path of Exile 2. If you're a shooter bro, or just someone that likes to machine gun enemies, this one might be for you. They created the Mercenary hoping to capture a different type of playstyle, and they nailed it. The Mercenary is likely going to be heavily focused on using the different types of crossbows in Path of Exile 2, anything from the machine gun style crossbow to more of a sniper. You could basically swap them out for guns and they'd be almost identical. They even have a grenade launcher attachment to augment the style further. Your Mercenary is set up to hit hard, slow enemies down with barriers, or damage them with ground effects over time. Where the Mercenary sets itself apart from the Ranger is with its instant feedback. When you click to shoot, you shoot, rather than having a slight drawback of a regular bow and arrow. This is a class I'm very interested in trying. I'm curious how it'll feel throughout a playthrough and how varied the skills become, but it is very focused on its ammo system, swapping between different types of rounds for your crossbow based on the situation. Changing lanes here to the Druid, another new class to Path of Exile 2. The Druid is your mix of strength and intelligence builds, with a focus on nature-based elemental magics, and of course, shape-shifting. The Druid, when in human form, casts a number of elemental spells, from calling down lightning, to bringing mini volcanoes out of the ground that spew volcanic magma onto enemies. Now the Druid can shapeshift into more than just a bear, but this is what we've seen so far. I imagine we'll also see a wolf, but I can't imagine what else. Throw a comment under the video and tell me what animal you'd like to see the Druid turn into. Personally, I'd love to see something a little out of left field, or see them use an animal that exists only in Path of Exile rather than something in our world. But that's just me. Like all classes, Druids have some incredible interplay between abilities, with the human form being able to summon those volcanoes, and the bear being able to slam down to reactivate them with the right setup. The druid is a great choice for players who like casting spells, but also want to be up close and personal dealing heavy physical damage, which, on the bear, builds a rage, increasing your damage as you hit enemies. These transformations, by the way, are automatic. They occur when you cast a related ability. Cast a bear ability, and you'll become a bear and perform it. Cast a spell, and you'll turn back into a human and cast with a small penalty for those transformations, which are generally quite speedy. The druid can also summon wolves, which in the gameplay demo would summon automatically when the bear stunned enemies through its gem combinations. And one last point on the bear, this is the perfect class to highlight again the different passive skill pages that you can spec into, which includes shapeshifting as well as weapon sets. I'll avoid saying this for every class, but damn, I need to try out those bear skills and see what else they have available for shapeshifting. From summoning wolves to the undead, our next class is the Witch. The Witch has been highlighted heavily as your classic necromancer or summoner, but it is much more diverse. Most classes will be able to get minions that match their playstyle, and of course, they can spec into these different skills too. But the Witch is going to be your Zoomancer class, with access to a ton of different minion varieties, a Spectre Pokemon style system that will allow you to summon enemies you've killed in the world by capturing their essence in a special skill gem. And the Witch also has skills that interact with corpses, summoning new enemies or helping you spread plagues. New to Path of Exile 2 is the insane amount of minions available to the Witch, and that some of these summons have their own skills you can activate in combat to make your Archer Skeletons shoot a poison cloud, or have your Arcana Skeletons explode a low-life minion. The Witch is perfect for players like me that want to build an army of the undead, or want to use plagues, contagions, and curses to weaken your enemies. The Witch is also a class that is going to benefit most from the new Spirit resource, which governs how many summons you can have at one time, while also being the new reservation mechanic, replacing mana and life reservation in Path of Exile 1. This is an awesome change that affects all classes, but it'll be the Witch in particular looking to stack this new resource the most. Alright, from here on, we no longer have fully dedicated videos for these classes, but for the Monk and the Sorceress, we did get to see them shown off at ExileCon 2023 with a gameplay walkthrough. The Monk is one of your dexterity and intelligence mixed characters. The Monk has commonly been shown using the Quarterstaff, and Grinding games look to have nailed that fluidity of movement style in many of the combat animations. Flowing through the combat arena, the Monk has a good mix of close range and mid-ranged attack options, including opportunities to quickly strike at your opponents as if teleporting across the screen. Monks are your black belt mystic warriors, using spells to soften up enemies before finishing them with a quick palm strike. The Monk really looks to be filling that power fantasy of a Shaolin that's trained for years while under a vow of silence to hone the mind. I really like how this class is animated. I could imagine the Monk having some of the most satisfying gameplay of all when mastered. And moving over from the Quarterstaff to the Magic Staff, the Sorceress is the other class we got a short demo of in the same video. Where the Witch is our summoner-focused intelligence class, the Sorceress is more closely aligned to casting elemental magics. I'll just throw the reminder in again, any class can use any skill, but the Sorceress is going to be closer to those elemental nodes, and of course is going to have its own unique ascendancies. The Sorceress is your classic spellcaster. If you're looking to play some kind of magic user that is more of a glass cannon, this is likely going to be the class for you. Casting ice, fire, and lightning spells, just to name a few, the Sorcerer can freeze enemies in place or shock them to increase damage. With abilities like Comet and Ice Nova, you can easily lock down packs while raining icy death on them from above. In the Sorceress demo, they also showed off the new system of basic abilities being tied to weapons like wands. If you do ever run out of mana as a Sorceress, as long as you've got the right weapon, you should be able to cast a Fireball or other free to cast ability to keep you in the game. And our final class that we've seen extended gameplay for is the Warrior, which we saw being shown off at Gamescom just a couple of months ago. The Warrior speaks for itself by name. You're a strength character, likely to be most proficient with two-handed maces or a one-hander and a shield combination, specializing in heavy physical damage and stuns. The Warrior can use abilities like Volcanic Fissure to bring fire into the mix, which can be reactivated with its heavy melee strikes to cause additional damage. The Warrior is going to be one of the classes you go to if you like the heavy-hitting tanky melee fighter, and is going to be one of the classes that benefits most from the active blocking mechanic in Path of Exile 2. This style of class has always been in my rotation of alts. Playing a class that can take a beating while handing one out is always a great time. Now, the following classes have all been announced, but have not been shown off in depth in the same way as the others. But we did get some additional information for the Huntress, so let's start there. The Huntress is another dexterity-based class. From the small snippets of gameplay we've seen, she's often using a spear which also has skills allowing it to be thrown at enemies further away. The Huntress is almost an extension of what you'd see in the Ranger fantasy if you swapped out those ranged weapons for a melee fighting style. quick concise strikes, and an ability to use walls of spears to slow enemies, or the whirling slash that creates a small windstorm around you that explodes for increased damage to enemies when you leave the area of effect. The Huntress is a master at setting up damaging abilities or attacks, landing them, dodging away to get more DPS in, and re-engaging with a playstyle focused on that mastery of movement and positioning. A great pick for players who, again, like that elf Lord of the Rings style of moving in and out of combat with quick concise strikes, or setting up combos for large damage. Alright, and for our last 4 classes, we've seen super quick cuts in some trailers on their playstyle, but not enough to give you a good rundown, or even fill out this section with enough footage as I talk to it. But let's touch on them, and this is where some theory and opinion comes in, so take this with a grain of salt. The Duelist in Path of Exile sits under the strength and dex attributes, and is likely to be aimed towards being a sword user primarily either with a shield or while dual wielding. I've not been able to find a breakdown of the skills associated with swords in Path of Exile 2, so this is up in the air for the time being. The Duelist fits the power fantasy of someone wanting to be a skilled swordsman or fighter. You're not brutish or forceful in the same way as a warrior, using quick slashes rather than heavy hits. In Path of Exile 1, the ascendancies for this class are focused on the ideas of being a champion, with a mix of defensive and offensive options, using taunts and banners and fortifying on low life, being a gladiator, with a mix of speed and power, specializing in bleed and dual wielding, or a slayer that is more heavily offense based, moving into life leech, area of effect, and critical strikes. If you fancy yourself a swordsman or want to play something akin to a knight, the Duelist is likely going to be the class that's for you. Next up is the Shadow, which is a class we're expecting to be our expert in daggers, traps, and claws, similar to how he's handled in Path of Exile 1. The Shadow is your assassin style character, diving in and out of combat with quick, concise combos geared towards controlling the flow of combat with traps or mines, and is a mix of dexterity and intelligence in his design. We're anticipating, if this character has similar ascendancies, that we'll see a focus on high crit damage, being a specialist in the use of traps and mines, or specializing more into damage over time skills like poisons, using poison and evasive skills to control the combat arena. If you like assassins, the idea of close range poisons, and being a glass cannon fighter, the Shadow is likely going to appeal to you. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the Shadow. With Path of Exile 2's more dynamic combat system, this class could really get a chance to shine. Our second last class is the Templar. This class is a staple in most ARPGs. The Templar almost meets the same power fantasy as the Paladin in many other ARPGs, but has some slight differences. This is a class we've not seen just like the Shadow, but what we have seen is the Templar using a flail and wearing what looks to be heavy armor, indicating they may be going down the route of making you that strong holy warrior type. The Templar is a class mixed between strength and intelligence. They're your strong melee fighter who uses magics, whether elemental or holy in nature, to smite enemies. In Path of Exile 1, the Templar is focused in its ascendancies on elemental magic, brands and totems, and auras to protect and supercharge their allies. I could see this class being a real boon to players in the party with one another. As a strong defender of faith, if you're a Paladin player, this class is likely going to appeal to you. And the Marauder is our final class we'll be touching on, and like the Warrior, is a pure strength class. It's difficult to differentiate between the Warrior we saw at Gamescom and what the Marauder will do differently when it comes to gameplay mechanics. I would expect, looking at what we have in Path of Exile, that the Marauder will likely retain the primal aspect of your strength classes. The Marauder in Path of Exile has ascendancies like Juggernaut that make you an absolute tank. The Berserker, which brings into more of that barbarian rage aspect with the use of war cries to buff yourself or debuff others. And the Chieftain, who has a focus on totems and fire damage. I imagine for Path of Exile 2, we're going to see aspects like the Juggernaut sit with the Warrior, while the Marauder will remain similar to a tribal fighter, more focused on totem use. We've seen the Warrior to be more focused on maces, and we're anticipating the Marauder to be focused on axes as a weapon type, but I could see these classes being highly specialized for players based on the ascendancies that we will see, which really highlight the reasons to try the class over the other, but we're yet to see those in action. And that brings us to the end of the classes. Remember guys, this is a base level class overview. These classes can be incredibly different to how they've been described by myself, and Grinding Gear Games have shown them off. This is a brief overview for new players. If you have an idea of a class you're keen to play, I'd start there and branch out into the insane depths of Path of Exile. We should be getting more information out of the Brazil Game Show happening now, and a New Zealand press tour taking place next week. Stay tuned for news coming out of both of those events and their live stream taking place in a few weeks' time. Until then, consider liking the video, subbing for more, but you being here, that's already enough. I stream here on YouTube and Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday, 6 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time. Come hang out, let's play some games. It's all variety content, not entirely focused on current Path of Exile, but when PoE 2 comes out, we're going to be going hard. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.